Hey everyone, this is Sam McCabe.
And Samantha McCabe.
And this is our first worship podcast, first of many. But before we kind of dive into some things we want to talk about, just want to kind of share a little bit of our story as worship leaders and how we got into this. Samantha, you want to go first?
Sure. I predominantly started worship leading mostly as a worship singer. Do you remember when they had praise teams?
Oh, yeah.
At least 5 to 7 people on stage in the front holding a mic.
Most of them are probably muted in the house,
Yes,
but whatever.
We're not telling them. Definitely sang way too many Revelation songs by Carrie Job. You know, that was like, and the thunder was in the track, so that was great.
Yes.
That was where I started in terms of church. I didn't grow up in the church, so I didn't have like really any exposure to that. So I didn't really understand truly like how to lead worship. The only way I learned how or really knew anything about it was from seeing it on TV. Like I tell people this a lot that watching Hillsong Church at my babysitter's house early in the morning, getting to see like the room respond in worship, like not even really looking at the worship leaders, but like they would always pan to the crowd and you would see just people like weeping. And I'm like, I remember being a little kid and being like, what is happening? And like, I really want to know, but I also want to experience that. And I was always musically inclined. So it was really, really sweet to see just the like bidding of the Lord in my life to like come and, to experience something I didn't know truly anything about. So, obviously I got saved, started going to church, but that like on a praise team is how I first started leading worship, which I wouldn't really call it leading worship. I was singing a song at church.
Yeah.
But I think when me and you transitioned to a more charismatic church, that's when I realized, wow, I really have no idea how to do this. Because it felt like we were supposed to be worship leading, not just singing a song.
You were supposed to be generating, like something was supposed to happen.
Right. Something powerful was supposed to happen.
Yeah, no pressure.
I do remember feeling a lot of pressure. And so.
And the after service evaluations.
Yeah. It was rough.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is true in other charismatic churches, but like, there's really not, unless something really powerful happens, there's not a lot of feedback. They're like, it was all right. I didn't feel it.
Yeah. If it wasn't an open heaven encounter,
I didn't get slain in the spirit.
It was all right.
So,
yeah, it was okay.
You really didn't do that great. But but it also was kind of helpful to not receive kind of the rock star, like, oh my gosh, you sounded so good today. Like that was like the praise team experience that I had.
Yeah.
Whereas in
there weren't like drum solos.
No.
And stuff. Yeah.
No. They didn't really care if you could sound good.
Yeah.
They wanted to know if you could lead them into the presence. And that was what I did not know yet. I was like, oh.
Well, more than that, they were wanting to be in the presence. They were wanting to be participators and not spectators. Whereas the other environment was like, because I used to play drums in that praise team, and the pastor would turn and look at me and be like, "Do a drum solo," and it's like, but why? Like, why?
Why?
And it's because
there was just a different culture, really, really different culture.
Yeah.
And so I think where we really cut our teeth in learning. Really without a lot of training, how to lead worship was in an environment when people really already they were expecting that God would move, and that God was going to come, and that His presence was going to be our portion during that time. You know, may not get to the Word of God, but we will worship. You know?
Yeah.
So,
yes.
I would say that's probably mostly my beginning journeys of worship leading. What about you?
Well, I grew up Southern Baptist.
There you go.
Just always in the church. My dad played acoustic guitar and would sing around the house, sing Beatles songs and things like that. And so when I joined the youth group when I was 11 in 6th grade, I joined the praise team.
Hey-o.
and was playing electric guitar. And funny thing is, when I started playing electric guitar in the worship band, the worship leader at the time, he wouldn't let us plug in our electric guitars for the first month.
Valid.
Just to like get us used to being on stage.
I really love that.
Yeah.
I think that should be a rule for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, there were things that were like, that was really great and seems really like spiritually intentional. But at the same time, like I remember we would always play kind of like a secular song. So like my first time playing in the praise team, the first song we played was Avril Lavigne's Complicated.
Wow.
And so, so it's like,
Hey,
I don't know, it's give and take.
kind of love that. But kind of not.
And so I did that for a few years and then transitioned over to playing drums when I was in high school. Did that for the rest of my time there.
And that is how I met you and you were a drummer. Mm-hmm. That was you.
Yeah.
Sam the drummer.
And I never sang in front of anyone. Although I was always obsessed with like Christian music. Like the first record I ever bought was Stephen Curtis Chapman's Live Out Loud, where he's holding that butterscotch Telecaster. Shout out Stephen Curtis if you're watching.
Yay.
Probably not, but maybe.
Hey, congrats on the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah, congrats on the Grand Ole Opry.
Come on.
And so I remember I would just like, I would stand in the mirror in my bathroom and like lip sync to Stephen Curtis Chapman songs.
That's
and
really sweet.
was just, went to bed every night watching live concert DVDs of like DC Talk and Audio Adrenaline and things like that. And so was always just immersed in Christian music and, but never sang in front of anyone until you and I started dating. And I wrote you this.
And you made the mistake
Of writing a song which I sang. I did a recording of it. I didn't sing it in front of you. But it was back in like 2009 when like T-Pain and Akon and all these people were like big in the pop music scene. So it was within bounds to put an obscene amount of autotune on your voice. And so that's what I did. And
it was kind of like a joke.
it was a total joke.
Yeah.
But you saw potential there, I guess.
I was like, hey, this isn't bad.
Yeah, and so your church was looking for a youth worship leader,
Yeah.
and you volunteered me for that position. And
I did.
The first Sunday that I led worship there was for 12 totally disinterested kids in a room without windows, and
Yep.
I felt like I was going to pass out on stage.
Well, yeah, I remember being there and your leg was shaking the entire time.
You
and I
could
was
see
like,
it through my boot cut jeans.
Yeah, the boot cut.
Yeah, loose fit. Yeah, those were the days. It's coming back.
And I realized in that moment, I was like, wow, this was a lot.
This is a big step.
I did this on accident to you.
Yeah. And the thing is people think like the larger the crowd, the more nervous you get. It's the opposite. Like you can lead worship for a room of a few thousand people, and it just kind of turns into this kind of blob of, unrecognizable faces. But you lead worship for 12 disinterested kids whose parents made them be there, who are just staring at you with their arms folded. There's nothing worse than that. And so I was there for a few years, and I feel like I grew a lot in terms of leading, my vocal ability, learning how to train up teams and things like that. And then transitioned over to the charismatic church we were at for a long time. And like you were saying, our journey is kind of similar from that point on. Really learned a lot in terms of knowing how to lead the room into being in the presence of God rather than just kind of performing a song excellently, but like for a room of spectators.
Wow.
That was kind of like, it felt like in the church, regardless of how good the musicians were or regardless of how solid the set was or whatever, it was like 1, 2, 3, presence of the Lord. Like, because people were just like ready and hungry for it.
I think that's how we experienced it at that church. Was like, I remember probably for the first time in church, really, because I think I would experience this like in my car or like.
Because this was around the time like Bethel was taking
Yeah.
off, Jesus Culture was taking off, like a lot of these more charismatic expressions were coming to the forefront.
Yeah, and I think the first time in church when I felt so confronted by the presence of God that I think we've had this conversation before, like it would have been disobedience to not yield and to not say, okay, Lord, I'm listening, I'm here, I'm present.
You would have had to willingly ignore.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that had happened to me because I think outside of maybe some of these really powerful live captures or, I wouldn't even just limit it to that, but like worship / I would say artists. Like I think at the time John Mark McMillan was really big.
Oh yeah, the Medicine.
And we are like, these were just all happening. That time was a kind of a crazy time if you think about it. Like so much was happening, I think, in the body of Christ, specifically having to do with music and worship, that I think has marked people it's marked us. For decades, changed, I think, where we are in that way. But anyways, I just think that church really showed us that like worship can be a very confrontational interaction. And if we can kind of work with God to the point where he's actually getting to move in through us, as us, you know, he actually gets to be in charge during that 45 minutes to an hour, because that's how it used to be. That's how long worship was. Yeah. And there was a lot of waiting, and there was a lot of sometimes awkward transitions, but like it was all part of this. This is not for you to just enjoy. This is for you to show up in it and participate in. And I think that's why I loved how sometimes the awkward transitions where it wasn't about making this seamless. Yeah. Because in a real relationship, there's awkward silence. Sure. You know? And so, anyways, yeah.
So the downside of being in that kind of environment, though, you know, we talked about the positives of leading worship for a room of people that are wanting to participate, recognizing that being on stage leading worship comes with a higher degree of stewardship than just performing the song excellently. I think one of the downsides of it can be you internalize a pressure that whatever is happening or not happening in the room is up to you.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, you know, like we were saying earlier, it got to the point where if it wasn't like the significant move of God, however that is defined, then it was like, yeah, it was okay. So then it creates a bar in your mind that is so high that you kind of don't have the ability to even reach that. And so then you leave the stage feeling like a failure, I guess, to be honest.
I mean, I think I felt that a lot.
Yeah, and so that would be the downside maybe to that, and that's probably not everywhere. I mean, that could have also just been, you know, we were in our early 20s, and that's just the immaturity of.
Honestly, had no idea what we were doing too.
Yeah. So. So that would be a downside of that, and then
definitely.
You know, going back to both of our stories, we transitioned out of that church, and I got a job as the worship director at a Methodist church that was demographically older than the church we were at, and it was very different in contrast because the charismatic church that we were at, it was like we could worship for an hour and a half, and the pastor would just get up and go, "Well, I don't think I even need to preach today. I think we did what we came here to do." And at this Methodist church, they were like, "We want you to play 4 songs and get off the stage
in 20 minutes,
maybe 20 minutes." That would be like if the Spirit's moving, we were on stage for 20 minutes. It was like 17 to 18, and so, which, you know, I think now I would be like, I don't like that, but then coming off of, you know, other things that were happening in our life, it felt really liberating to feel like I don't have to wear this pressure to make something happen in the room.
Yeah.
I can just get up and play the songs and still try to engage myself. I'm not going back to where we were, where it's like you just play the songs and to a bunch of spectators.
Right.
I can try to enter in myself, but I'm also not trying to generate anything out of my own strength or strive to have a moment. Because, to be honest, there was a fair degree of that, like where, God was moving, and there were moments that happened in that more charismatic expression. But there was also a lot of, I'm going to try to force a moment because I think a moment is the only thing that's going to make this set successful in hindsight.
Right.
And so we were there for a few years.
Yeah.
And that was a real healing place.
I think, I mean, a significant part of our story and why that was really, I think, the hand of God for us, and probably a big piece of why we're still okay in following Jesus is because we had just gone through some significant suffering. And so, to be frank, I didn't have the spiritual, emotional, physical ability to like be this generator of spirituality on a Sunday morning and like leading you into the third heaven. Like there was none of that. I'm like, I'm just here because I'm really trying to love Jesus.
Yeah.
And some days I really don't want to because of what's happened and how I'm so disillusioned with who I thought he was supposed to be for me. And so
real quick, just a 30,000 foot view, since we're talking about our stories. What we're referencing is in 2015, we were asked to be a part of a church plant in Tel Aviv, Israel, that ended up falling through.
Yep.
And
Failing.
yes, we had quit our jobs and all that stuff to be a part of that.
Yeah.
To be a part of this thing that we had been given prophetic words about and all this sort of stuff, and all of it fell through, and that was really disillusioning. I think because the prophetic element of it was brought into it, it also made me at least think like, do I even believe that somebody can speak into my life as though it's God speaking into my life? Is that, what degree of that is healthy and unhealthy?
Yep.
I think we were in the unhealthy place of that.
There was also very little formation. Like kind of as we referenced, worship was the main squeeze, for our church experience. There was very little like discipleship formation, like these are the things that keep you afloat.
Yeah, well, the grid for formation in that environment was, and this is not just that environment, I think a lot of people internalize this, is that the primary place of formation is worship.
Yeah.
So like in worship, God will meet you and transform in your heart in a moment what actually takes years of steady obedience.
Right.
And so that's why you have,
direction. Yeah.
that's why we're having conferences every month and all of these events, is because that was the only grid anyone had for formation. Like, oh, if you go to this conference, God's going to mark you and change your life and do all
Yeah.
that stuff. And I don't say that pejoratively, like, because I think that did happen for some people.
Yeah.
But when that's all that it ever is, then when people bump up against the wall of, hey, actually this issue that's happening in your life is not going to be solved in a worship set.
Yeah.
It's going to be solved through, years of obedience. It's going to be solved through, maybe you need to go get counseling.
But what is that? That's suffering.
Yeah.
And there was that. So that word was never used.
No, there was no equipping for that.
So even if it's like something I would even call discipleship. Like I'm going to be a student of the Holy Spirit. I'm going to be student maybe of somebody I trust. And they're probably going to lead me, just like the Spirit did Jesus, into a wilderness. Like, that's like a chosen suffering.
Yeah, I mean, well, Jesus said himself, like, if you want to be my disciple, you got to take up your cross and follow me.
Right.
Like, suffering is kind
the
of step
deal.
one.
Yeah. And because that really wasn't even in the vernacular at that time, like, it was not an expectation to come to church and to be, like, pushed on in that way. Like, hey, let's dig into this season of suffering. And so when suffering happened, it was almost like you did something wrong to deserve that, or you don't have enough faith because something like this thing happened to you and you didn't have enough faith.
Or you should totally avoid it.
Run.
and like suppress it using faith language, or just
Spiritually
kind of
bypass
praise.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
spiritual bypassing. I mean, that's what I wrote this song and released it a few years ago called "Can't Praise Away the Morning," and that's
Yeah.
what that's about. Like the idea of, yeah, I'm suffering right now, but I'm just going to wear a smile and use faith language until I get on the other side of it.
Yeah.
The only thing is, you never get on the other side of it.
God
'Cause
really wants to take you through.
It's like that old childhood thing where it's like, you can't go around it.
Yep.
You can't go over it. You can't go under it. You
You
got to go through it.
Because in the through, that is the formation. Something has to die.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah. And that something is you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's things that need to fall away. And that is, if we really believe our highest calling is to be formed into the image of his son, that's what we signed up for.
Well, that's 1 Corinthians 4, I think, where Paul's like, hey, everything in your life is going to be tried by fire. And the only thing that's of God.
Take me through the fire.
Yeah.
Don't take me, Lord.
No, please don't.
Get me around that stuff.
Take me around the fire. Yeah.
Don't
take me over the flames. Yeah.
Don't sing those songs if you don't want it.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Anyways,
So that happened in our
that
life.
happened in our life. So going to a Methodist church for a bit where there really wasn't an awareness and an
even prior to
expectation.
that,
Yes, we did. I'm skipping over another level of very big suffering.
we were
Sorry.
like, okay, we're going to try to re-enlist. Even though we didn't really even want to go back to that church.
Yeah, we did.
I think we did and we didn't.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
At least for me,
Yeah.
I did for prideful reasons.
Oh, yeah,
because
absolutely.
I thought if I go to a different church, I'm going to have to start from scratch in terms of influence and all that stuff. Total pride.
I think on my end it was like, this is my church, man. I can't like let it go.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of pride.
Yeah. So we went back and we tried to tough it out, and we, in the midst of that, we found out that we were pregnant with our firstborn, and we were thinking, going through the grief of a failed dream and disillusionment with your faith and all that kind of stuff. For me, this was really the light at the end of the tunnel. This is our life getting back on track, us reaching a sense of normalcy and stability in our life, us planting roots, and then in January of 2017, our daughter passed away. And, there's a long story kind of about all of that, but just keeping it 30,000 foot, returning back.
If we weren't wrecked in the first one, we were shipwrecked, devastated, nothing, there's no boat anymore.
Kicking us while we're down.
Yeah.
And
so, I mean, like if us talking about not having any language for suffering, any teaching on suffering, any
how about
theodicy.
now? How about now?
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
I remember we went to church the Sunday after our daughter passed away, I think as a show of resilience.
Sure.
At least in my mind, that's what that was.
Yeah.
Which, is understandable. Whether or not I would do that again, probably not. But
maybe I would go to a liturgical church that day.
Yeah.
High church where they're not going to do something stupid.
Yeah, I need to just receive communion, say the Nicene Creed, and
Dude,
leave.
I need to hold on for dear life to the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
God.
So we went, and the first song that they sang in the church had this. I've never heard this song since. I don't know what song it is, but it has this lyric in it that says, "You give me joy instead of pain." And I just got so angry sitting in the seat because I was like, well, clearly not. Because my life is not saying that that's the case.
I mean, caveat, sing songs that you can sing on the worst day of your life. That needs to be how you pick your set list.
Yeah.
Don't sing a song that's, because there's going to be somebody in that room that just survived the worst day of their life.
Yes.
Pick songs that they can take with them outside of that room and sing when they're in the midst of tears, when they are in confrontation with the life that wants to pretty much kind of destroy them.
Well, I think even too, maybe in a broader sense, is to sing biblical songs.
I mean, yes.
Because
obviously, yeah.
Because the idea of God gives me joy instead of pain is not biblical. It's
Maybe
God gives me joy in the midst of pain.
Yeah.
But often, and I've been in a bunch of co-writes and songwrites before. There is the temptation to try to condense a phrase down to make it singable at the expense of it being biblical.
Right.
And I would much rather something be a little more clunky in cadence and be biblical.
Important. Words are important.
Words are forming people. We're, as worship leaders, we are catechizing our congregation on how to view God.
Right.
Which, for those of you who don't know what catechism is, that's just, we are training people. We are giving people the lens. We're building the frameworks by which people view God.
And I would say at that time, there really were not a lot of songs of suffering.
No. There's a lot of circumstance change.
There were victory songs, a
lot of victory songs.
Like almost I would say too much.
Yeah.
But I have been really grateful since that time that I feel like there has become a widened vernacular for, suffering, hardship, in the songs that we sing, especially on Sunday in corporate worship. Like if you don't have any of those songs, find them or write them.
Yes.
Because they are needed.
Yeah.
But coming back to our original situation at the Methodist Church, there is something very refreshing about having a liturgy. Mm-hmm. Knowing that worship wasn't maybe the most important part of the service for us, because we were like, we are holding on by a thread. So if this thing is hanging on our part of it, sorry, it's not gonna be anything that probably moves and shakes you, but like that was so nice for us to just be able to go to church. Yes, to sing some songs, to almost try to believe them. Like that was where I was at. I was like, God, I'm singing these, but most of them I really don't even like yet. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if I like you anymore.
No, yeah.
But like, it was just such a sweet holding pattern for us to be in, where there wasn't a lot of expectation for us to be super spiritual, but it allowed us to sing songs that we eventually grew to believe. I remember like the first time you sang "Draw Me Close to You," and I just like remember weeping.
I haven't thought about that song in a while.
Because there's just like there's something so relational in that song that is just like, and it's saying, "Lead me back to you," you know? Mm-hmm. And I just remember, like, for one, it's an oldie, and they somehow have a way to like grab me right in the.
Oh, there's songs that have a lot of history.
Yeah, in the heart, and then you know, it just makes me want to sing it. You know,
There's songs that would come on, at the 2 a.m. Wow Worship commercials where they're playing all the highlight videos of like old Hillsong, Integrity, Hosanna, all of these things.
Darlene.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I just think that song in particular, it like was starting to woo my heart back. To know that he is like, I lay it all down again to hear you say that I'm your friend, and it's like
It's
what?
beautiful.
That's not been on my grid for a long time, God. But it was like my mind was like, nah. But this was like, we miss it.
I remember for me in that season, I would sit in my office at the church and watch Bethel worship videos and just cry.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why I was crying.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I was crying because I was mourning a charismaticness that I no longer believed in, or if I was longing for something that I wanted to believe in again, which maybe it was probably both of those things.
Sure.
But I remember, for me, everything kind of shifted when I was at this Methodist church, because I was at this retreat for like youth groups or something, and they wanted me to come lead worship at it, and so I went, and we broke off into these small groups to just kind of talk about like what we're struggling with and stuff, and it was me, this youth pastor from like East Texas, and then there was one of the ladies who was one of the pastors at our church. Her name was Mary Tumulty. Shout out, Mary.
Go Mary. We're fans.
Big fans. I said, I don't know how to lead worship anymore because I don't believe any of the things I'm singing. Which, is kind of an intense thing to say.
Sure. You were in an intense place.
Yeah. No filters. And she just looks at me and she was like, have you ever thought about telling that to the congregation when you're leading them? And in my mind, when we were in the charismatic church, it was like, I remember the pastor, when we left, I told him that I haven't felt it when I led worship for like 6 months, and he about had a heart attack because
that is the expectation.
And you certainly never admit that. Mm-hmm. And so when she said that, I was like, no, never will I ever say that. Are you wanting me to get fired as soon as the service is over? Mm-hmm. And she was like, well, don't you think that like everyone in the congregation probably feels the same way? And it would probably make it more relatable. It would make you more relatable to them if you just told them that you're in the same boat they're in. Mm. And
come on. So
I was like, well, I don't know, because I'm not one to like wear my heart on my sleeve. And I think this was the most pastoral moment I've ever experienced in my entire life. So after our daughter passed away, her name was Harper, I got a harp tattooed on my arm.
What's Mary going to say?
And I was sitting there, and I said, I don't know if I can do that because I'm not one to wear my heart on my sleeve. And she just looked me dead in the eyes, and she's like, yes, you are. And then she just glanced down at my arm and then glanced up back at me. Didn't say anything else after that. And I lost it. I felt like I was sitting in a small group with Jesus, where he just like
he sings you.
He said everything that needed to be said, like that one statement. Sure you do, and then the glance said a novel's worth of information. Lord. And so I got up that next Sunday, and I just, I think we were I think we were leading the song "King of My Heart" because that was like real big at the time, and we had a lot of qualms with the bridge. You're never going to let me down, because clearly God lets you down, because he lets you down because you form expectations apart from Him, and then He won't meet those. And so
longevity, He won't let you down.
in Romans 8:28, He won't let you down.
But in the moments of where you think you know exactly what He should do,
When I define what God should do, He will let that down almost intentionally. But so I just got up in front of the congregation. I said, "Hey, like, we're about to sing this song. You know, a lot of you know what has happened in my wife and I's life. I struggle with singing the bridge, but I believe that God works all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. And so maybe if you hear those lyrics and you struggle with them too, you can just remember that in an ultimate sense, God is holding us and all of those things." And that was, I think up until that point, I had been a worship leader in our various contexts, but I think that was the first time I had ever stepped into being like a worship pastor, like trying to shepherd the room. And that happened because I was pastored into that. And so we were there for a little while longer, and then there was some events that happened, and then COVID, and now we're at the church right now, which is Restoration Church, which is in the North Houston area, Montgomery County, Wood Forest. And we're worship pastoring here. We have a vibrant worship community. You know, God's placed dreams and visions on our heart for what that community is supposed to be and look like.
And I think we feel more than ever the culture of what worship is in the world, and what the expectations for that, for even worship leaders, worship pastors to be. And we feel very pulled to, like, that's not always in alignment with what it looks like to worship, even just to worship God in the secret place by yourself. But then also, like, your cool outfits and your tracks and your you know,
The smoke, the lights, the LED
like,
walls.
that is
all that
not
stuff.
going to lead people to a place, for one, where they could be changed, where they could encounter the God of the universe. Like, that's not going to do it. It's not going to cut it. And it's also not going to be a thing that forms this worship leader pastor to be conformed into the image of His Son. Like, it's not going to do it.
Well, we're all going to have to stand before God and answer for something.
Yeah.
And while none of those things, tracks, you know, whatever clothes you like, smoke, LED lights, all that, none of those things are inherently bad. You just won't have to answer to God for any of those things. You'll have to answer to God for how you stewarded and shepherded the people that He's put under your care.
Right.
And so,
and your own devotion to Him.
Yes.
Like, and so, like, I remember being here at Restoration, one of my first, I wouldn't even really call it a role, but one of the initiatives I took was while you were leading the young adult ministry. You know, that was something that we used to kind of tag team together at our prior church. So in a way, I was like, okay, if I can't tag team this pastorally with Sam, I'm going to try to really form the worship culture that, so I was like a pseudo worship pastor for the young adult ministry.
yeah, volunteer worship pastor.
Spirit of the volunteer, right?
Oh, God.
And I remember being I think we were in some kind of round. Yes, we were in the round and we were doing a worship night. And I remember, like, hearing someone in the crowd sing really loud. And it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't beautiful at the same time. And I felt
I think I might remember
this impression from the Lord. I felt like He was like, I don't need another singer. I don't need another worship leader. I want a shepherd. And I think for me, that's when it was like, that's something that I need to learn how to do. And that's something I know a generation of people, because what do people see? What do young people see? They see people singing songs on the internet, influencing people to do the same, like getting likes, videos. Like, that's the thing that worship has somewhat become.
They see beautiful people in beautiful clothes and beautiful churches having social media influence. It's celebrityism.
Sure. And like, I think what I hope and pray and wish that people grasp was like, did you sense the presence of God? Like, did you, because that's what took me out the first time I saw worship leading. I wasn't enamored with Darlene Scheck on that stage.
Shout out Darlene, though.
Singing Shout to the Lord. Hey, we love you. Come be on our podcast. But I was struck by what was happening in the room. And I hope, like if anything, this can be a time between me and you and anybody else that comes on this podcast, that we would be focused on, like, how do we bring it back to the heart of worship? How do we bring it back to being in his presence, about him, for him, and leading other people into that place, into adoration, because you get new perspective when you worship him rightly. Like, when you see him rightly, all the other things come into focus to where they should be.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, and I think worship is an important part of our formation. Like, and I mean that as, like, not the corporate Sunday morning. Yes, that is part of it, but like your worship life, not just singing, but like, yes, partly singing. That is your personal, it's like your lifeline with God and how you walk with him. And especially if that's like your vocation, like that's something you need to be doing. And
yeah, if the only time you're doing that is on Sunday morning on the stage,
like how,
no shame, no condemnation, but there's a lot more
how
available.
often are you doing that by yourself in your room? Like how often are you pulling a Don Potter and just turning your back to the wall and leading worship until you move the heart of God, until you move your own soul to worship? Like, how often are you doing that?
Yeah, how often are you paying attention to the little nudges of the Spirit throughout the day to turn your heart and turn your eyes towards Jesus?
Yeah.
Just for a moment. Because, I mean, this is my opinion, but I think if you don't know how to do that in normal day life, you're not doing that on stage.
If you don't know how to access the presence of God, like Brother Lawrence while he's washing dishes, like, and I don't even like it, you need to know how to do it. It's just literally a tenderness. Like, sometimes that happens to me, and it happens to me. It's not because I conjured up this, like, I feel an invitation from the Spirit to just sing, I'm coming back to the heart, and I'm just at the sink.
Well, so here's the thing, like, the language, like accessing the presence, I think I even disagree with that language, because access implies that I need to do something to unlock it.
Yeah,
which
so good.
And I think the better way to phrase that is you're opening yourself up to it.
Yeah.
So like when I'm I've written a number amount of songs while I'm making dinner.
Right.
Because I'm present in the moment, and it's easy for me to just, while I'm stirring something in a pot, to just like open myself up to the presence of God. And sometimes that looks like singing, like, you're singing the heart of worship. Like yesterday, I was just singing this old Corey Asbury song, "Fragrance of Your Name," and I don't sing the whole song, but I just sing this phrase like, "I love the way you move so tenderly upon my heart," and just like allowing that to till the field,
to permeate,
yeah, and to break up any of the fallow ground or whatever that's sitting in there.
Yeah.
It's really about opening yourself up. And if you're not being intentional to do that, if you're not paying attention, if you're not paying attention to the windows, you'll recognize them less.
Yeah.
And you'll be up on stage on Sunday morning feeling like you're hanging out there on a limb and you don't know what to do. And it's because you don't know what to do, because you haven't come with oil already. You're trying to do it on the fly. And if it works, it's because God loves his people and will move through you because he loves them and doesn't want to punish the congregation because you haven't spent time with him. But
and God doesn't need you.
He doesn't. He can
work through a donkey. He can do whatever he wants.
He can do whatever he wants.
But you have a privilege
and
a responsibility And I almost want to bring it back to like, just for like, if you can't, if thinking about the congregation overwhelms you at this point, just do it for your own soul.
Yeah.
Lead
Well,
your own soul.
I think you're missing out. Like, God can bypass you. He doesn't need you. But you're missing out on an opportunity to partner with him.
Yeah. Co-labor. Yeah.
That's what you're missing out on.
Yeah. And he's having to, pick up slack where you're not really participating, And I think too, this comes down to also like, how often are you praying?
Yeah.
Augustine.
Without ceasing, brother.
Augustine says that singing is praying twice. So let's not try to make these things two different, like opposing things. But I would say like prayer is a way to tenderize your heart. So open up the Psalms, pray them, sing them. They are your prayer manual.
Well, I remember when we were in the charismatic church, they used this phrase. They're quoting Paul in Colossians when he's talking about, we just sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, and we use that in reference to spontaneous moments in worship. That's what that is.
Yeah.
And maybe.
Yeah.
But the verse that precedes that, it might even be the same verse. It's just the first half.
It is, yeah.
Paul says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. So if you struggle with spontaneous moments in worship, maybe go read the Bible a lot.
Eat the scroll.
Yeah. But yeah, like go sing the Psalms, go pray the Psalms, go read the scriptures until they're pouring out of you.
Yeah.
And then when you're leading worship,
yeah.
And this plays with spontaneous moments in worship, but it also plays in those moments where, as a worship pastor, you want to exhort the congregation. Because you can be on stage and go, man, I feel this prompting to say something right now, whether it's in the song or between a song. And then as soon as you start talking, you go, I have no idea what I'm about to say. Because you got nothing in the queue.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's on your heart yet. That's not the best position to be in.
Yeah.
And again, God can still work. God can still speak. Not everything is dependent on you.
You don't want to I feel like this probably happens a lot for people is like they say something and they like afterwards they hear scripture like, oh, thank God that was in there.
Yes.
Confirmation.
Yeah.
When it's like, yeah, that's really cool. But like maybe get that in you so that with authority that the word that's actually what the Lord has already said. Let's agree with it and let's walk in it.
And there's been times where I give an exhortation, and what I'm trying to do is tie in the song we're currently singing with the scriptures so that people enter into it even more. But if you don't know the scriptures, you don't know how to do that.
Yeah, it gets real clunky real quick.
And so then you end up saying things that get you on like a Worship Fails Instagram account. Yeah. And you don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. I don't even think that's because you don't know the word. It's just sometimes people get their words messed up and it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, you never live it down.
But in a sense to kind of like tie that back into celebrityism is like part of our experience as worship pastors, worship leaders is to do these things enough and to take the risks enough that we make mistakes.
Because
because
all the time.
Being a celebrity, being a perfect, sleek worship leader, worship pastor that always makes the Instagram reels, like you're not, unless you want to be on Worship Fails, like those things are perfected. Those things are perfect, to say the least, And so if you want to kind of sign up for what we're talking about, you're going to make mistakes. You're gonna say the wrong thing. You're gonna sing the wrong thing. You're gonna try something because you're trying to follow the Holy Spirit, and it's not gonna always work out. That's the story of my life.
Well, it's like with anything, like even going to the gym. It's like the point of going to the gym is failure,
right?
And the point of learning is failure.
Yeah.
Like you don't get anything right the first time you do it.
Yeah, right.
You learn through failure.
And in doing that, that is actually kind of fighting the culture that wants to make everything something that we share on the internet. Like
polished, perfect, pitch corrected.
Yeah.
All of that stuff.
Yeah, like could we actually be maybe a church that cares about God and the presence of God so much that we're willing to step out in faith and maybe get something wrong, or it not be completely produced well, and the words on the screen don't match what the singer, like all of that stuff. Like, could we actually access something more special and more maybe transformative than if we just did it to be the best, the most glossy version of
and the thing
church.
is those things, again, in and of themselves are not bad. Like, pitch correction's not bad. Any of these things are not bad.
I need it.
But yeah, I need it too. Lord Jesus. But when that becomes the focus and you lose the other thing, you've lost the substance.
Yes, we are doing form without substance.
Yes, and like form is fine if you have substance.
Yeah,
But if you don't have substance, then everything you're doing is just kind of hollow.
that's scary to me.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
who cares at that point?
I came to church to be with God's people, but to ultimately, where two or more are gathered, God is there also. Like, I'm here for him. And if he's not coming, if he's not invited, if he's not priority.
If the presence of God is not there, people are coming to watch a karaoke band and a TED Talk. And
I don't want
who
that.
cares?
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather just stay home, you know?
Yeah.
So the goal, I think, I feel the natural closing. I think the goal is that we would, as worship leaders, lead from a place of tenderness,
Yeah.
lead from a place of transparency, work on that sort of stuff throughout the week so that you have the substance when you get on stage. This isn't the first time, like praying into your Sunday morning set is not the first time you're praying since the last time you prayed into your Sunday morning set,
Yeah.
like
for your people too. Like,
yeah.
catch the heart of God for your church.
Yeah.
Like, what if you actually spent time praying, like, God, give me a heart for them?
What would your church look like if you went up there on a weekend and just walked the sanctuary and prayed? I've done that. And, every time I do that, I don't know if God moves more because I do that or if I just recognize
You
his
recognize
movement
the
more.
windows.
I think it's probably both and
opportunity,
maybe,
yeah.
but if you want to have your eyes open to God moving in your congregation, especially if you feel discouraged that God maybe isn't moving to the degree that you want him to, just go spend time in your sanctuary when no one's there and just pray.
But you see how that goal is different from making it, like arriving at some internet fame or a certain amount of people coming to your church. Like, that's different than catching the heart of God for your people. That doesn't care.
It's a vision beyond yourself.
Yes. And
The vision is God.
right. And God moving in your church to the point where people, like, what if revival comes? Like that.
Yes.
That the heart of God would fully be realized in your congregation, in your region, in your city, in your nation. Like,
Are you sharing God's vision for your church?
Yeah.
Like it says in the Psalms when David says, "All my expectation is from you."
yes,
We talked earlier about being in the charismatic church for a while and how we placed our own expectancy on what the worship service was supposed to be like, and so you kind of rise and fall on your own expectancy.
Right.
Whereas
in performance. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas if you're going into your church service, if you're in just the life of your church, not just Sunday to Sunday, but if you're going into it going, God, what's your expectation for this? What do you want to see happen? And how can I partner with that?
How can I?
And
yeah.
how can I shepherd people? Once you do in my heart what you want to do in the church, how can I
Come on.
partner with you in shepherding people into that thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
That's what I want to see. That's what I want us to be
yeah.
at our church.
Yeah.
I think that's how God wants to move in
Yeah.
the church, if
Yeah.
I can put my 2 cents in there for that. But yeah, I think this has been a really great
Yeah.
conversation, episode 1.
Yep. More to come.
Yeah, this is the Phantom Menace of our episodes.
Whoa.
Whoa.
That could be not good.
Or it won't be good in the moment, but it'll be really nostalgic when you listen
There
to
you
this
go.
20 years from now.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for listening,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Signing out.
Yep.